So yeah, so I had kind of no idea what you were gonna draw, and I kind of, fucking A, what is happening out there?
It's a Bowery, dude. Spring and Bowery.
Hey guys, it's Cam from Craft and Tailored. In this episode of The Details, we are gonna be hanging out with our friend Chris Fernandez at Kings Avenue Tattoo. We are in the Lower East Side of New York City in what is commonly referred to as the Bowery. And if you are familiar with rock and roll culture and all that kind of stuff, the Bowery is the birthplace of a lot of amazing rock and roll, as well as art, and was the starting point for a lot of things that we know as icons today. Chris Fernandez is an amazing tattoo artist. He is kind of the newer generation of American traditional tattoo artists. He's got a really iconic style, and he's also a bit of a watch guy. So let's go talk watches, let's get tattooed, let's talk details. You know what I mean? Let's go.
What's up, dude? How you doing, man?
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, likewise, man. How's
Thanks for
everything?
having me. Good.
Absolutely.
So what's up? You want to talk watches?
Yeah, let's do it.
Little tattoo history vibing.
Let's do it, man.
I sent you a text message and we were talking a little bit about like cards, and I liked this idea of like playing with the hand that you were dealt in life, metaphorically speaking, right?
Totally.
So I said, let's do some cards. You're like, what do you want? And I'm like, yo, chef's choice. I kind of like rolling that way where I kind of throw an idea out there and like you pull some inspiration, you kind of go through it. So let's go through what we got. Talk to me maybe a little bit about some of the inspiration, and then we'll go from there.
Totally. Pretty simply, we got a hand holding some cards.
Looks like kind of a mixed bag there.
Yeah, mixed bag. I mean, you're saying like play the cards you were dealt. You know, like it's not always going to be a good one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I kind of like that because when you see like card tattoos, you normally see like some kind of sequence and shit.
Yeah, it's either a winner or a loser or something like
Right.
that. You know, it's loosely based off a design that was made by Percy Waters, and I just like to take some of those designs and not replicate them exactly, but just kind of use them as like a point of reference.
Totally.
Sometimes replicating them exactly is also good, but sometimes I like to kind of give it a little change here and there.
What's funny about like designs and some of these things, I think, you know, we're talking about some of the old school tattooers and that kind of stuff. And, you know, there's almost like these designs that become an icon, like, you know, praying hands or a sacred heart with roses around it or something like that, where you kind of see interpretations of that design that maybe started off as like an element of flash somewhere.
Totally.
But I think you see that within the watch world as well. If we think about like Audemars Piguet and maybe Hublot, right? Like you see some similarity there, or even better yet, Gerald Genta, who designed Audemars Piguet. Sorry, I know everybody's gonna bash me on that one, but Audemars Piguet. And the original Patek Nautilus, kind of the same design, taking inspiration maybe from one another, but ultimately different. And I think that that's kind of cool with your work, especially. You look at it and you go, oh, that's traditional American tattooing, right?
Absolutely.
And we were kind of talking a little bit earlier about maybe some like thicker lines and that kind of stuff too, which is very prominent in the work that you do as well.
Yeah. I mean, I like to keep my designs reminiscent of designs from the past, but also like modern to an extent, you know, and also have my natural hand to it. Like this is, even if I trace something, it's still gonna have how I trace them. So that's what I try and do with every design.
I think one of the things that I would say that you're known for is your bold pops of color, and you have a very unique and interesting way of shading. And I'm not going to reveal all the secrets, but if you look at your Instagram and body of work, you'll see that your tattoos are very distinctive because you look at a piece and you're like, oh, that's a piece that Chris did, right? And I think that that's a cool thing to have your own iconic designer look to. So let's draw this out. I'm really excited, and then we'll talk about where I'm going to put it.
Amazing. Let's do it. I'll get this line drawn.
All right, cool. I shaved this morning for you.
I'm gonna still go back in there though.
You know what I'm saying?
Hey, I appreciate it.
How many times have you heard that, Chris?
Sounds like a first date, you know what I mean?
You know what's weird is I had a feeling it was gonna go right there.
As soon as he came in, I was like, oh yeah, this is where I go there.
You want me to like kind of relax down? Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm gonna ride it right here.
Yep. What do you think, Roni? You think it's a winner? Ready? Syncing audio. Oh, Tyler. Yeah. Hold my hand. Hold my hand.
All right, buddy, you ready?
Yeah.
I'm actually move this like that. There you go.
Yeah. Anything special there with your machines or?
Nothing too special. It's just a standard liner made by one of my friends, and my daily driver, similar to like my Submariner.
Hey, look at you getting in there on that watch.
Yeah, there you go, right? I wear it every day. I use this thing every day. Every tattoo I do.
It's pretty cool. How long have you had it?
This machine, I've probably had it about 4 years.
Okay.
I have a ton of other machines that I will use from time to time, but this is just the one that I use to do every single outline I do.
That's pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
So we were talking about your sub and when you bought it.
Yeah.
And you were looking at a few things, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, initially, but after a while I realized that's what I ended up really wanting, kind of more than anything else, and it's very recognizable.
We have a mutual friend, David Bader, and it was cool because David's in Miami. We were in Miami for a watch show maybe, I don't know, about a month ago, and I was like, you know what, like, I want to get tattooed. Like, where can I get tattooed? And he's like, well, I don't know if anybody's gonna be able to tattoo you tonight. You know, I kind of just, with my tattooing, I'm like, like, kind of have these ideas rolling around in my head, and then, you know, one by one get them done, or all that kind of stuff. But
A little spur of the moment.
he's like, well, where are you going next? I'm like, oh, I'm going up to New York. He's like, well, do you know about Chris Fernandez? And I'm like, no, I've never heard of him before. And he showed me your work, and I was like, yep, this is the shit. You know, like, this is my kind of jam. So he ended up putting us together, and, you know, we met and kind of had a cool hang, and this is kind of how the video came to be. It's cool because, like, I think that through watches, I'm sure much like tattooing, you meet people that kind of have, you know, I think it's kind of all interconnected.
There's a lot of similarities with anything that's collectible, but also similar with watches. They were initially a tool of telling time, or with other watches, you know, whatever their specified usage was, they started as that and have turned into something that can now be collected. And tattoos are highly collectible, especially from, you know, maybe
guys
artists.
like you?
Many artists, many really talented tattooers throughout the world.
Yeah.
There's a lot of parallels between that and collecting watches. I mean, tattoos initially were, it was a craft, it was a trade. It was essentially come in, you give the client what they want, you know, and that's it. And they go home and, you know, you collect your money. There wasn't like a stardom about it. There wasn't anything cool about tattoos, really.
Yeah, there wasn't like necessarily, there was an artistry, but it was looked at differently.
Anything can be considered an art form, realistically, but it depends how you're going about it.
Yeah.
If you're pushing envelopes or doing things that haven't been done, you're using a creative force to do that craft, that trade, that action of any sort. And I think that's kind of what, obviously, there's visual pictures, so there's an easy relation to visual art here, but it has similarities to, you know, cutting hair, or, you know, cobblers making shoes, like so many different things.
Like, that's the funny thing about a watch, right? Like, it's this analog kind of like dated piece of equipment, right? We all have phones now and we can tell the time, but like, I think that something as simple as being able to tell the time and really pulling the layers back behind what that means, I think is interesting. You know, we were talking the other day about the Bowery and tattooing in New York. When did tattooing actually become legal in New York City?
I believe it was in 1998.
Yeah, like 98, right?
Yeah.
And I've always considered New York kind of like an epicenter for tattooing, especially the Bowery, obviously, or in the Village, right? Like,
Yeah, all over the East Village. I mean, Tom DeVita had his shop over there.
Yep.
So you had artists in Brooklyn as well, like Tony Polito.
I thought that was so interesting that tattoos were not really like legal, right?
Yeah, it wasn't legal to be like practicing tattoos. I don't initially remember when they became illegal, but I know it was illegal for quite some time.
The thing that's interesting about this series, like the details, like whether you're collecting cars or you have an artistry or you're collecting different things, I think that the collector spirit is something that like I really relate to because, you know, for me, there have been times where I've gotten on an airplane, flown halfway across the world to like chase down a watch, and people might think that that's like crazy.
Yeah.
And I know guys that fly halfway around the world to go get tattooed by
Yeah.
certain dudes, you know. You know, this is an interesting form of collectible because people are like, oh, you know, tattoos are real permanent. You know, are you sure you're gonna get that there? And it's forever, it's permanent, right? But you had an interesting view on it, kind of changed my perspective, where you're like, well, not really. Tattoos aren't permanent because if you know, we have paintings in museums that are hundreds of years old, right?
Yeah.
But tattoos are like this kind of like living, breathing art form, right?
Yeah, it's yours in the most like purest and the most absolute way. It is solely your tattoo. It can never be anybody else's, and it will never be anybody else's. You're gonna wear it for the rest of your life, and when you die, it dies with you.
Yeah, it's not permanent.
It's solely yours, and there's something kind of to be said about that. It's kind of incredible. There's really nothing else like it.
So, what was your first tattoo?
My first tattoo was done by one of my mentors back home in Miami, by the name of John Vale. It is a Hanya, and it's tattooed on my shin. He ended up doing my whole leg.
Shin is an interesting spot for a first.
Hey man, thought it looked cool.
Were other guys around you getting tattooed?
Oh, everybody was.
Okay.
I mean, growing up, playing in bands and stuff like that, and being in like punk and hardcore, like I was always kind of one of the younger dudes in the group. Very large group down there, and everybody was getting tattooed, and at the time a lot of people were getting like leg sleeves.
I have a funny story about my first tattoo. I grew up in this place south of Los Angeles called Orange County, and there's this tattoo shop in Laguna Beach called Laguna Beach Tattoo. This wasn't like your modern hip tattoo parlor with an espresso machine and like all that shit, you know what I mean? It was like two old school dudes that were like tatted all over the place, kind of a heavy-handed kind of jam, you know? And you would kind of pick flash and just, you know, sit down and somebody would get blasted up, and that was the jam, you know? I feel lucky that I kind of walked by that and walked into like that type of tattooing because I kind of got into the traditional stuff early. So you're originally from Miami?
Yep, born and raised.
You were tattooing down there for a while?
Yeah, I worked down there on 8th Street in Miami, in an area called West Miami.
Okay.
Learned there from John Vale, who did my first tattoo, and then Javier Betancourt. That place straight up molded me to who I am, like in tattooing, in everything. Ocho Placas was the shop that I worked at. I mean, that place will forever be home.
What brought you up to New York?
I left Miami in 2016 to move to DC because my girlfriend at the time, now wife, she was living in DC, and we were doing long
distance thing, yeah?
Yeah, for about a year, and decided to make the move full time. And
Nice.
I worked at a shop called Tattoo Paradise for a guy named Matt Knopp, one of the best dudes I know. Love that guy. And we were there for about a year, and finally, you know, kind of decided to figure something else out, and the opportunity came to come work here at Kings Avenue, which is a shop owned by Mike Rubendahl.
And Mike is pretty legendary in the tattooing world as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The guy's a very talented, very hardworking, great dude. And I couldn't really pass up the opportunity to come work for him and come work in, New York City. Kind of always been like a place I've wanted to live and work.
New York is a really interesting place. You know, I split a lot of time between LA and New York, and they're kind of polar opposites. I think New York, especially the Bowery, even though it's a little bit more gentrified, you still have that like vibe and that feeling here that is real, you know, and
yeah,
and it's cool.
It's been bred here, you know, and I feel lucky to even be around working here, you know, and it's just like an inspiring place to work, you know.
You kind of like pick it up and you're like, this thing has like a vibe, you know, like there's something going on here, right?
Totally, you can feel it.
Same thing here too. I think just the shop, it's a really special place.
Yeah, we've had a lot of special people come through here and inspired me in a lot of ways, and, you know, inspired a lot of different tattooers.
There is a community behind it, much in the sense that there's a community behind watch collecting, and it's interesting learning about, you know, a tattooer's story as well, because ultimately, would you agree that your art is changing and kind of progressing and developing, right?
Yeah, how I draw will have like its roots, its base, its, you know, which started with, you know, back home in Miami when I was taught how to draw for a tattoo. As soon as I stopped changing or stopped wanting to push or learn or do different things, like, you might as well just hang it up, you know. There's no reason to even tattoo at that point.
I think like most things too, watch collecting or, you know, tattoos especially, like, you know, you kind of almost have to like experience it and develop a palette for certain things. And the only way to do that is literally by like getting into it.
You know, I'd seen Rolexes my whole life, you know, in the street, you know, walking down. I didn't even know they were Rolexes, but I'd seen them, you know, and then when I started gaining interest, you know, I would go online and look at photos and really figure out what I liked and what little details, but it's pretty crazy the first time I held one. It was like no other watch I've ever felt before. There's something heavy and weighted about like a Rolex or like some of these other watches that are just so well made that you can feel how well made they are.
Yeah, like you can feel the quality.
Even if it's sleek or slim, you know, whatever, but it just feels like powerful when you see it or feel it or whatever.
That's what really got me on the Royal Oak, especially the 5402. I was like starting to look at the bracelet and then how thin the watch was, and I was like, wow, like there's a lot of thought and a lot of substance behind this.
Absolutely. I mean, to fit a certain amount of technology to a certain thing takes quite a bit of thought to really think about how we're gonna make this even happen.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's pretty incredible. That watch is a really beautiful piece. I think also on the same token, I think now it's kind of nice because tattoos have kind of been opened up to the majority and at least to collect them, you know, and stuff like that. And I think that's really nice too, because I mean, who wouldn't want to share their art with the world, you know?
Yeah. So, does your wife have tattoos?
She does. It's actually how I met her.
Really?
Yeah. I was doing a guest spot in DC, and a mutual friend of ours actually referred her to come get tattooed by me. Long story short, we hit it off.
That's cool, man.
And kind of just kept in touch for a couple months, and then she came to visit me down in Miami, did a bunch of back and forth, and
the rest is history, as they say.
Yep.
So what do your parents think of your tattooing and all that kind of stuff? Any negative, or they've been supportive?
Dude, they are the absolute best people. You know, my dad was all about it. My mom, even more supportive. You know, just the only thing they said was that I like bust my ass when I do it, you know. Now every time I talk to them, they want to get tattooed.
So your mom and dad have tattoos?
Yeah.
Did they have tattoos before you started tattooing?
No, they didn't.
Have they gotten tattooed by anybody else, or you've done all their tattoos?
No, I've done all of them. I've done 2 on my dad, and then I've done, I believe, like 4 on my mom.
Wow.
Kind of crazy.
What an honor, right?
Yeah.
To tattoo your parents.
Yeah, they've been, like I said, they've been nothing but supportive.
This is cool, man. I appreciate you allowing us to do this. And
oh man, I'm super amped.
What's funny is like there's these mediums of art and culture and whatever, and for me professionally it's watches, right? But we have these amazing conversations with our clients and our friends, and I always find inspiration in that stuff, and I was like, you know, how do I share this feeling and share this stuff with people? And that's what led us to the creation of this series.
There's so many little cultures, so many little like niche worlds. It's cool to do this and mesh the two. Maybe create like your own little niche thing, because everybody has their own interests. So, you know, yours is, you know, watches, tattoos, cars, music, you know, but next guy could be into, you know, two Pokemon out of those cards. Three, but yeah, Pokemon cards or sports or, you know, whatever it may be. Done, honestly.
I mean, I could go longer if you want.
I'm drawing on, dude. Yeah, dude. I think we're gonna call it there.
I'd rather get tattooed than get my blood drawn.
Yeah.
How about that? Chris, thanks so much for having us. I really appreciate this. I'm really excited about this new piece. I will definitely send you photos after it heals up.
Yeah.
So if you wouldn't mind, can we maybe give you guys a shout out? How can people get in touch with you, see your work, maybe drop the Instagram?
Totally. You can find my work on Instagram. It's at Chris Fernandez Tattooing. Our shop Instagram at Kings Ave Tattoo.
Be sure to check out the links. I'll provide them in the comment section below. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for tuning in.